In the previous episode, we saw a new river emerging, stronger and more transformative than all the others. Christianity, born on the banks of Jerusalem, spread rapidly, overturning old beliefs and announcing a new path of faith. The mighty rivers of faith and philosophy that sprang from the axial age did not flow in isolation. They soon found other channels, mingled their waters, and shaped new landscapes, especially under the shadow of a powerful eagle. Rome. Welcome, noble Templar travelers, to the third episode of the epic timeline of mythology. 40,000 years of gods and beliefs. In the first centuries of the Common Era, the Roman Empire became an immense cultural melting pot. The Greek Olympus donned the Roman toga, Zeus became Jupiter, the stern father ensuring imperial order, Ares turned into Mars, the disciplined god of legions whose clangor echoed from Britannia to Mesopotamia. Foundation myths like that of Aeneas, the Trojan refugee, and Romulus, son of the war god, legitimized Rome's dominion over the known world. While the Senate debated and the legions marched, the emperor himself could be acclaimed as divus, divine, after death, his cult a pillar of the state. Along the stone roads connecting the empire, not only soldiers and merchants traveled, but also gods and mysteries from distant lands. The popular cult of Egyptian Isis, the compassionate mother, and the initiatory rites of Mithras, the Persian god of the unconquered sun, found devotees in ports and military camps. But one of the rivers flowing into this Roman sea swelled with unusual force: Christianity. The faith born from the dusty steps of Jesus in Judea spread like wildfire, first among the poor and dispossessed, later reaching all social strata. Between the 1st and 7th centuries CE, this faith and, later, Islam, born from the revelations to the Prophet Muhammad in 7th century Arabia, radically transformed the spiritual landscape. As monotheism expanded, it not only supplanted the old pantheons but also developed its own vibrant mythic narratives. Angels warred against demons for souls, saints performed miracles and interceded for the faithful, and in the Islamic imagination, the elusive jinn, made of smokeless fire, interacted with humans. As Rome declined in the west, other mythic voices gained strength in the cold forests and stormy seas of northern Europe. In Scandinavia, Norse mythology painted a universe shaped by intense and often tragic gods. Odin, the one-eyed all-father, thirsting for wisdom and hanging from the world tree Yggdrasil. Thor, the thunderous defender of Midgard with his hammer Mjolnir. And Loki, the ambiguous trickster whose fate was bound to Ragnarok, the inevitable twilight of the gods. Further west, on the islands and coasts of Celtic Europe, Druids guarded ancestral knowledge of nature and the other world. Irish myths told of the Tuatha De Danann, a magical and divine people, and of heroes like Cu Chulainn. In the mists of Britain, the first seeds of Arthurian legends began to sprout. And further east still, in the vast Slavic forests, thunder announced the power of Perun, while Veles ruled the underworld and magic. As the centuries passed, medieval Europe became predominantly Christian, but the old beliefs did not vanish. They blended, creating a rich tapestry of folklore. Patron saints took on the roles of old local gods, and fairy tales about fairies, goblins, and werewolves preserved echoes of a magical world beneath the surface of official faith. At the same time, in the secret laboratories of alchemists, the quest for the transmutation of metals. Then came the Renaissance, and Europe rediscovered with fascination the myths of classical Greece and Rome. Botticelli painted the birth of Venus. Michelangelo sculpted David. Between 1600 and 1800 CE, the Enlightenment swept through Europe, questioning religious dogmas and mythic explanations with logic and the scientific method. Folk stories continued to be told, and the Age of Exploration brought Europe into contact, often brutal, with the vast and complex mythologies of the Aztecs and Incas in the Americas, and with glimpses of African and Asian traditions. These narratives were often misunderstood, recorded as curiosities, or demonized. The world simultaneously seemed larger and more disenchanted. Gutenberg's press spread ideas like never before. Ships crossed oceans seeking gold and glory. But the human heart still pulsed with the need for stories, for meaning, for something beyond the purely rational. The stage was set for a new era, an age of machines, global empires, and new surprising forms of myth. The stage was set, as we saw, for a new era. But the light that began to shine more intensely from the 18th century onward was not merely that of machines or new nations, but the cold, analytical light of reason. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on science, logic, and skepticism, began to cast long shadows over the ancient myths that had explained the world for millennia. Thunder was no longer Hephaestus's anvil or Thor's hammer, but an electrical phenomenon explainable by natural laws. Diseases were no longer seen primarily as divine punishment or the work of evil spirits, but as the result of germs and biological processes. Newton's universe functioned like a precise clock, and the stars, once dwellings of gods or heroes, became distant suns in a vast and indifferent cosmos. Historical and archaeological criticism began to question the literalness of sacred scriptures. In the rapidly growing industrial cities, intimate contact with the cycles of nature, so central to many ancient mythologies, began to fade. The gods of Olympus, of Asgard, of Heliopolis, gradually retreated from the center of active belief for many, becoming characters in literature, subjects for art, or allegories of the past, a process some would call the disenchantment of the world. However, the human heart was not content with cold reason and a clockwork universe alone. The need for meaning, spiritual connection, and community remained vibrant. Throughout the 19th century, new religious narratives began to sprout, offering new syntheses and paths in a rapidly changing world. In the United States, Joseph Smith presented the Book of Mormon around 1830, founding the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In Victorian parlors across Europe and America, spiritualism flourished in the mid-19th century, with mediums promising direct contact with deceased loved ones. Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy attempted to create a grand synthesis of ancient wisdom, Eastern mysticism, and emerging science. Other religions, such as the Baha'i Faith, originating in Persia in the mid-19th century, also emerged with messages of unity and progressive revelation to humanity. The 20th century saw this search for new, or renewed forms of spirituality continue and diversify, often as a direct reaction to modernity. It was in this context that Gerald Gardner, in 1950s England, publicized Wicca, a modern neo-pagan movement consciously seeking to revive or reconstruct pre-Christian practices and beliefs. These religions, though inspired by echoes of the past, they were, and are, modern faiths, adapted to the values and needs of the present. And so, we arrive at the present day. The great pantheons of Sumer, Egypt, Greece, or Scandinavia no longer command empires or stand at the center of religious life for most people. In this sense, one could say that many ancient mythologies have died as living, literal belief systems. However, the incessant human search for meaning, for narratives that explain our place in the cosmos, remains incredibly alive. Each era, each culture, wove its own tapestry of stories to make sense of the mystery of existence. However, the journey that began in those dark caves has not ended. The heritage of these countless stories, of forgotten gods and rediscovered beliefs, belongs to us. The need to tell stories, find patterns, and connect with each other, and something bigger than ourselves, is intrinsically human. The language may have changed, from symbols on stone to sacred scriptures, from sung epics to computer code. And the next story, perhaps it's already beginning to be whispered, somewhere, right now. As long as there is mystery, as long as we gaze at the stars in awe, the flame of the quest that drives us will continue to burn. See you on the next journey. Bye.